Okay, we're live now. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Kyverno Contributors Meeting. This is Shooting Out. Today is June 3rd, 2021. So today on the agenda, we have a few topics. First, we have the demo for the HA support. Pooja and Viktesh will recover the January policy. We have done the HA demo for the webhook server and as well as the policy report in the last meeting. If you missed that, feel free to check out the video recording. And next, I see Jim, you added something. We want to talk about the doc and where do we need help and how do we maintain that? I know we're a bit behind of the 136. Some of the features are not in with the doc available. So we're going to talk about that. And I see Arsh, you added something else. So we'll come back to that at the end of the meeting. Okay, so first to start on, I will switch to Pooja and Venkatesh. They will give us the demo about the HA.
Hey guys. So Venkatesh will give you the basic demo for generate policy. So let's start with Venkatesh first with some basic policies. Venkatesh, would you like to start?
Yeah. So hey everyone. So today I'm going to give a demo for the generate policy with HA. So right now I'm running HA, Kyverno HA with 3 pods. So I'm going to apply the 2 generate policies. One is the network policy. So when we create the namespace, we will generate one namespace, and another is to create the resource quota and the limit range for the same namespace. Just give me a second. Yeah. So as you can see, I have HA with 3 pod running of the Kyverno. So now I'm going to apply the policy. Yeah, so I have already applied this. Yeah. So I have both the policy. Now we'll check. Yeah, so I have right now I have 2 policies which will create the network policy and the resource quota when the namespace is created. So now I'm going to create one namespace. Yeah, so namespace get created. So now we'll check the network policy and the resource quotas get created in the particular namespace. Yeah, so this is one network policy created, and now we'll check the resource quota and the limit range. Yeah, so we have 2 policies. So one is for the network policy to create the network policy, and one is for request quota and the limit range. Yeah, so this is the small demo for the generate policy, which for the Kyverno HA. So now I'm heading towards the Pooja for the complex demo. There we are showing if any pod get deleted, means any leader get killed. So how HA will work.
Yeah, so I'll continue from here. So I'll just give a brief first. So what we are going to do is, just a second, let me share my screen first. Yeah, so I'm going to apply a generate policy, which will which will get triggered on creating a namespace with this label, and it will generate a network policy. So with this, after this, I'm going to apply 100 namespaces so that it can create 100, so that it will generate 100 network policies. In between, I'm going to kill the leader, and then we will see that it will itself like elect another leader, and the process also we will see that it will not stop in between anywhere. So currently I'm running it with 3 instances. So these are the pods, and here I have also taken this, that this is the pod, which is currently, this is the leader, so this is the pod. And how to check is like this: leader election. So this is, you can see, started leading. Okay, so let me apply the policy and show you. Okay, so here we are applying the, we applied the policy. Okay, so here it is successfully applied. Now I'll take this file. So this is having 100 namespace. Just the difference is like I have just made a test 1, test 2 like this till 100. So the last one is test 100. So I'm going to apply this file, and let's see. Okay, and here. So this is like it started. If you want to see the names also, it's good. And now I'll just kill the leader. So here, if you will see, the leader is second one. Okay, so this should stop. And let's check here. Okay, so one more is there, and let's see like now which one is elected as the next leader. So another one is this. Started leading.
I think it's the first part.
Yeah. Let me clean this and then let's try. Okay, just this. Okay,
Yeah.
started leading over here. So yes, and so even after like deleting the leader pod, after that also it will it was continuing the process, and here you can see. So now we have 100 namespaces created and network policy created. So this is giving 101 as it also counts the header. So if you'll see here, so there are 100 network policy which got created, and in between I also killed the leader. The leader is also got shifted, like they have the pods have selected between them. So yes, this is the demo. So in between the process, and the same thing happens while also scaling up or down. So this is like the demo for the when what happens when we kill the leader. So yes, this is what I have. Do you, let me know, like if you want to try something else, like if you want me to try something else here.
Is this with failure policy set to fail, or is it still ignore? I know that this is a generate policy and not a validate, but are we testing this with validations with the failure policy set to fail?
Currently, I have used the generate policy, and that is like just like what do you say? Just it will get triggered on the based on the namespace with this label. So I just wanted to show like how the process will not get interrupted because of the because we kill the leader. So yes, I have taken the generate policy. So this is a generic policy. I think it is also there in our documents. So yes.
For the failure action, are you talking about the validation failure action or the something in the webhook configured in the webhook?
The webhook, the dynamic admission failure policy. Are we setting that to fail now?
No, we still set it to ignore.
Okay. We probably need to change that, I would think.
Yeah, so I think we want to document that and recommend, certainly for production clusters. I think we need to decide if we do that by default, or when do we sort of recommend that it's open fail versus open closed, right? So, or fail open versus fail closed. Yeah, because it may be like, certainly for dev test clusters, things like that, maybe you still want to allow it to fail, but for production, we could recommend, because we won't be running HA by default either, right? So if you're just running a single instance in a basic install, we don't want a Kyverno sort of downtime to restrict the webhook. But if you're running HA and you're set up for production, then we would want to document how to change that webhook configuration as well.
Has a node failure scenario been tested with these generate policies? Killing a pod is like the easiest way to simulate it because the pod's gone, so that's an immediate test. But killing a node and seeing what happens there, where that node has the leader, has that been tested?
No, not yet. I think we still have to add the node affinity to Kyverno. Currently, it is not guaranteed that all pods are scheduled across nodes, but definitely that's one of the tests we need to perform before we release the official HA.
Yeah, so again, that would be if you're running with a multi-node setup and you want to kind of spread. So we probably don't want strong affinity, but then, yeah, the challenge is if you reboot a node, if two Kyverno pods end up on the same instance, yeah,
Right.
then we would prefer them to be spread across instances.
Well, I mean, that would be just a simple pod anti-affinity rule that you put in the manifest, not any sort of node affinity. That would solve that. But I mean, actually testing the behavior of what happens and when faced with the generate policies, if you do have a node failure scenario, assuming that the node that fails is running the leader, what happens? How long does it take to converge? Stuff like that. Because that's really what, or the main thing that HA is meant to protect against, not somebody deleting by hand a pod that happens to be the leader. This is a test. This is a test just to do like boilerplate or sanity smoke testing, but I'm curious to see how this would work with failing of an entire node. because you have like the 5 minute,
Right.
You have the 5 minute window basically that kubelet's gonna wait, and that 5 minute window is gonna expire, but the pod's obviously down. So is
Yeah,
it
the
gonna wait?
leader election heartbeat will kick in before that, right? So
what's the heartbeat interval?
I think it updates every 2 seconds and fails at 10 seconds, right? Shooting,
Right.
if I, those are the defaults.
Right, that's what we configured.
Oh, okay, all right. So that would still be a good test to do then. Just failing a node that has that leader pod on it, and then seeing that the generate policies continue to function
Right.
after new leaders elected.
Yeah, so definitely we need to, kind of think about how do we allow, and should this, even for configuration, should this be like an option on the Helm chart that you want HA config, and which means that then you need, of course, multiple instances, you need the webhooks configured differently, you want the node or the pod affinity to be also defined, or anti-affinity. Or we start with at least documenting everything, and then we can provide more options in the configuration.
Yeah, I mean, I would my suggestion there would probably be where if it's installed with Helm chart, if a replica is greater than 1, then pod anti-affinity is automatically set, and the webhook configuration is set to fail. But I mean, that's obviously that's I guess a debatable point. But I think the main use case, the whole reason why most users would elect to have multiple replicas is for availability, and availability has those implications. So if that's not what you wanted, then maybe not set those options. But if it is greater than 1, then automatically configure it so that it's in a position of availability and not have to recommend, oh, go to the docs and read this if that's what you really want. But we can, I guess, take that at another time. But this is good to see.
Yeah, I think it will also be good to understand, just to get some more real world experience and see, because running production clusters with this set to fail may have some other implications, right? But if high availability works as designed, then it should not be a problem. But I don't think we have enough, again, data to know for sure.
Right, and there was a edge case for this. If I think it's fine, maybe fine to set failure policy to fail if we're running HA, but before Kyverno is functioning in your cluster, I see that Kyverno takes down the cluster, that it kind of prevent the cluster from reboot. So I saw there are different use cases, if the Kyverno is not functioning or it cannot receive the webhook admission request, it'll somehow block the kube scheduler, kube API server, kube's controller manager from recovering to their healthy state. So that's another case that we want to test thoroughly. And I would say we can provide such an option to configure the failure policy, but by default, until we fully tested, I wouldn't set it to fail in this case.
Yeah, totally agree that it needs to be thoroughly tested and vetted. But I mean, once some of those kinks are ironed out, I think the default behavior should be fail. But for the time being, maybe for the next several minor releases, patch releases and whatnot, until there's enough data and enough user adoption, then maybe just keep that at ignore right now, so that we don't blow up users' clusters inadvertently.
Right, agree. Okay, any other questions for the HA, for the generate policy? Anything?
So I think the question is what do we need to do for HA before we put out 1.4, right? Because right now the two major features for 1.4 is this HA and then the Prometheus metrics, which we want to also enable and document and sort of have available. So like are these, so I think some of the configuration options, things like that, we can start with documenting perhaps for 1.4, but let's decide on what are the test cases we have to do and make sure those are complete before we right now we put out like a beta 1, but how do we get to 1.4 GA?
Are there specific tests that are not in end-to-end tests at this point? Is that what you're looking? Is that what you look like?
Yeah. So
other ideas for tests.
So tests as well as docs, right? What do we need to call 1.4 GA? So for tests, we haven't done. I think we've done multi-pod testing, but not multi-node. So definitely that's a good one to get covered. But let's maybe, and we can do this offline and just quickly draft a list of tests and things we need to do to get to 1.4 GA.
Yeah. Do you want to take that as an issue and just sort of discuss things in the issue for both of those, like 1.4 readiness preparations or something like that?
Yeah, that's a good idea. We could either as an issue or discussion on GitHub. We can.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
I can
I'll
create that. And okay, go ahead. All right, that sounds good. And yeah, let's and again, if there's other specific things, so definitely we should at least talk about if someone configures HA, what are the few other things, and we can of course see if we want to. We could even have a separate install.yaml for now with the HA configuration if needed. Sounds good.
Okay, so I will stop sharing my screen. Okay, shooting, then you can go ahead with the other topics then, I think.
Sure. I think we talked about the docs. Jim, is that what you want to discuss for the 1.4?
Well, so HA is one item, and then also I think maybe we already have issues filed, but just wanted to get some general sense for, I believe it's mostly in the area of some of the new custom JamesPath functions, right, where we're behind right now. But is there anything else that we need help on? And one of the things I was thinking about, and I don't know how this officially works, but there is a way to get some documentation help also from CNCF. So we could potentially go that route, or if it's straightforward enough, I might have some time over the weekend or something, we can just knock these out and catch up on some of the doc items.
Yeah, I'm hoping to do that this weekend. I've been a little behind on it. What I could use some help on is real examples of each of the filters. I know that we have a list of the filters that was kindly provided, and that'll help, but I think it would be more equally beneficial, I guess, to have at least one real world example that uses each filter, so that a user can not only see what the syntax is for writing a policy that uses that custom JamesPath filter, but also how to actually format it with the values. Because one of the things in the nice label match function is the input has to be an object versus a string for the others, which means that the syntax is slightly different and the use case is slightly different. So so that would really help. But other than that, it's I think just a time factor. But like I said, I'm kind of taking that, and of course more than happy to have help. And I do see that there's a PR out there when it comes to the Prometheus stuff. Started going through that a little bit, but as far as the 136 things, I'm hoping that by the end of the weekend, I can have a PR out there that covers most, if not all, of those items.
Okay. All right. Yeah, let me know where, if there's specific examples, I can help work on those and try and craft some examples for those functions. So just maybe, tag me in the issue, or just create a new issue if you want, whatever's easier.
Yeah, there's already an issue out here. I can
Okay.
tag you in it.
Okay.
I'll do that.
Sounds good. Is there anything else pending from 136 on the docs, or was that mostly the custom James path?
There are a few things I have. So I've been creating milestones for the docs and putting issues inside of those. So just looking at milestones real quick, there's some passing config map and API call variables, operators on list values, and just some miscellaneous things that we've come across that I've added those into the notes. And there's also a project that I have out there for, these are less structured, and there's nothing that's pending on that list. But the biggest thing are the James path functions.
Okay. All right. And then of course, we'll have to figure out what we want to document for HA. So yeah, maybe we can add a new task for that. And once we have some tests and things complete, we'll decide.
Yeah, and we can use the discussion that I just created. There's not much in the discussion right now, but whatever we fill that out, I can sort of break that. Once we collect enough stuff when it comes to the documentation angle, I can break that out into an issue and then put that in some milestone.
Awesome. Okay.
Sounds good. All right, and move to the next. Arsh, I see you have some suggestions to adding the vote for Kyverno repo. I think we have talked about this in one of the previous users meeting, but I don't think we have an issue for that. I do research it a bit, but I see from my research, I see that we can only add the vote for adding labels or close the issue, but I didn't see the vote actually that you can assign issues.
So is there a reason for that? Because like a lot of GC and CF projects had, so I thought like this would be a good thing we could have for Kyverno, where like an external contributor can use commands like -assign and then ping any one of the reviewers. I actually have a couple of examples of bots in other projects. I can share my screen if you would.
Yep, let me stop share.
I mean, yeah, so this is like Litmus Chaos. Their bot is like pretty simple right now, which just add labels. I think this can be done pretty easily because this is a GitHub action. I haven't looked at it in much detail, but this seems more simpler. But like, yeah, this one is for cert manager, and this one is a bit more complicated. And these are some commands it has, like you can assign and like run specific tests. And then of course, like there's the Kubernetes one that is another layer of complexity. Right. So is there a reason like we can't use something like this?
No, not really. I think the Kubernetes is using the Pro. This is something Kubernetes customized, and it has a lot of advanced features, like you can approve the PR, or you can assign issues to different contributors. But with the other tools that are available on the market, I didn't see those advanced features. So as long as we can find a way to integrate with Pro, I think that's the best. But I think currently, if there's a way to assign labels or just to add the labels, I think that will be also good.
Yeah, I think like the Kubernetes one, Prow, this so cert manager is also using this, like they've called it JetStack bot, but internally it is Prow, because if you like go to this link, then it does redirect you here. So right. I think like since Kubernetes is open sourced it, so it can be customized, but yeah, this is something like which will need investigation. So is this something which would be nice to have? Like, should I open an issue for it? And should we start looking into it? Just wanted
Yeah,
to
sure.
get
Sure,
a
let's create an issue, and I can put a link there in the agenda. So Kubernetes provides some compute resources, and because we're a CNCF project, so I believe we can ask for some resources that are available in Kubernetes. I put a link in the agenda. If we can open that, I think there are ways that we can require or request the compute resources.
all right. I'll get the issue started and then we can go on. If nothing, we can have at least a simple label adding one like Litmus has.
Okay, sounds good.
What would we need the compute resources for? I'm not following.
Because let me add that. So for some of the test cases, like for example, if you're running 100 nodes with thousands of workloads on your cluster, we want to perform some scalability testing with Kyverno. So currently we don't have that much resources.
Oh, okay.
So
You're talking about testing on the code base itself. I thought
right.
not bots that will operate on the repo.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So Arch, can you please create an issue and then let's continue discussion there?
Yep, I'll do that.
Right, thank you. And Yash, I see you are online. Yash, are you there?
Yep. Am I audible?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
So I was actually looking forward to present a ready-to-use dashboard, which was suggested in the previous meetings around Kyverno metrics. So basically, like just a quick, primer on this thing. So as a part of the Kyverno's Prometheus integration, we are gonna expose a bunch of metrics via Kyverno, representing basically the activity associated with the Kyverno policies deployed over a user's cluster. So this was suggested in one of the previous meetings that it would be great to have a ready-to-use dashboard for a user so that they don't have to, hassle through setting up their own panels to deal with the complex queries and stuff. So I'm going to show that, and I'm going to also show the docs which I wrote for Kyverno metrics, like explaining how to set them up and explaining each of them. So I'll first of all begin with the docs. So I'll actually start sharing my screen. Just a second. I hope my screen is visible.
Yep, I can see the
Cool.
screen.
So I have a local Hugo build which is running, representing the docs. So yeah, so if you go to the official index page of Kyverno docs, you'll see that there's a new heading under it called monitoring Kyverno with Prometheus metrics. And as a part of it, the docs are pretty straightforward. They're not like over-explained. So the whole idea is pretty straightforward, that I'm giving a quick intro that why is this needed and how it would be useful, and then a quick installation and setup. So it's Helm oriented basically. And behind the scenes, what's happening is that the metrics, right, they're being exposed as a different server. So right now, already Kyverno was exposing a server, was already exposing a service with the name Kyverno-SVC, at which it was only exposing one port. But after this metrics integration, it's going to expose another dedicated port. Like by default, it's 8000. And at this port, their custom Prometheus store can actually scrape Kyverno at this endpoint, right? So I've explained the entire installation and setup around this thing. And also this thing by default runs as a cluster IP, like the way basically Kyverno was running previously. But this can be tweaked further to be run as node port as well, so that if the Prometheus store is sitting outside the cluster, then it can reach out to the Kyverno service and scrape the metrics. So that's the idea. And this documentation is further suborganized into these following subheadings. So one is like a bonus one, which is basically around, how to set up and use that ready-to-use Grafana dashboard. But apart from that, rest of them are individual explanations around the individual metrics. So first of all, I'll just quickly show one of the metrics. So let me show actually a better one, which is more verbose. So as to give, okay, let's look at the policy rule execution latency one. This is a pretty decent one. So it simply dives into a one-liner explanation of what the metric does. And it also represents a quick, like what metric value is it representing, because every metric has a metric value. And it has a bunch of use cases just to make the user feel more relatable, how the metric can be used further. And I have tabulated below that how the filter, like what are the possible filter labels which are possible as a part of this metric, so that they'll know that, okay, these are all the possible filters on which they can kind of go granular on this metric. And beneath and underneath that, I provide, like, for every metric, basically for every metrics explanation, I provide 3 to 4 useful queries which the user can take and basically make use of them. So that's the whole idea pretty much. And if I show the documents, like this is the exact same structure which is followed like for the explanation of or the documentation of any other metric. Like for example, this Kyverno policy changes info, similar structure, metric value, use cases, filter labels, and useful queries. And so yeah, same structure for all of the metrics. And if I go quickly to the documentation of the ready-to-use dashboard, so the idea is pretty straightforward, right? So we basically have to, okay, right now the images are not being populated, but once it gets merged, it will be like being populated, because it's trying to read from a place which will be available once the issue will be merged. Oh, the PR will be merged. Anyways, the idea is pretty straightforward, that like we basically want to like absolutely streamline importing the dashboard for the user. So in Grafana, what I basically did was, as a developer, I just created a dashboard manually for Kyverno and templatized the data source, because like the data source which I was using is obviously going to be different for the user for which they are using, right? So I templatized this and exported it basically in the form of JSON. So all the user has to do is that they just have to execute this curl command. They'll basically get a JSON in their hands, and they just, like, Grafana like provides this functionality where you can, directly cook up a dashboard out of a JSON, kind of like in a dashboard as a code sort of manner. So the user can just simply feed that JSON file to their Grafana and they'll automatically have a dashboard ready. And yeah, before just getting the dashboard ready, Grafana will actually prompt them and ask them that, okay, what is the name of the dashboard they want to use, or they're setting for, what is the data source in which Kyverno is exposing their metrics. And once they just import it, it's going to be done. So just a matter of few clicks and a dashboard would look like this. So basically it has like so there are like multiple levels of granularity which are being represented here. So the top one here is kind of like a high level view as to how things are, looking from the cluster, from a high level across the cluster, like how many cluster policies are there, how many namespace policies are there, like what is the success rate of the background scans, what is the like overall success rate of the rule executions, etc. And further, if we go down, so we can actually, get a nice set of panels around different kinds of metrics. So, and I have subcategorized them into rows. So like there's like this sort of, organization that, okay, there's a dedicated row of panels for policy rule results. So for example, this is one, like basically it is depicting panels around the results of admission reviews and background scans per rule. And below it, like this per policy level panels. And like people also would like to possibly track the amount of policy failures happening across their cluster. Like they might want to have some SLA budgets around that. Similarly, I've introduced panels around policy rule info as well, that how many currently policies are active, how many rules are active. And I have actually further, the individual panel is subcategorized into, different categories. So for example, this panel basically subcategorizes the active policies with respect to the policy types, whereas this one subcategorizes the policy with respect to the policy's validation action, that how many of them are enforced and how many of them are audit, right? And similarly, I have a panel below which represents currently the active rules which are present in the cluster, and they're also subcategorized on the basis of, the rule type: mutate, validate, or generate. And similarly, I have the policy rule execution latency set of panels, which are basically representing the metrics, the insights associated with, the latency being consumed by Kyverno around the execution of rules or policies. So I have like put up two panels here. One panel representing the average rule execution latency at the at the level of rules, like how latent each rule is. And there's another panel which is basically representing the latency at the level of policies, like how much time policies are taking. So and like the last one is policy changes. It is kind of like a miscellaneous one, but yeah, like basically this can be actually used to track how many creations are happening, policy creations, how many policy updations or deletions are happening, for example. This bottom right one policy changes. Actually, I changed the design to this one, like the one, I'm hovering over like the design I'm talking about, because this one looks very, I don't know, very contrasty. But yeah, I guess it wasn't reflected in the latest build, I guess. But nonetheless, it's kind of looking like this one only. If I quickly show you, actually, like just to quickly show you. Yep. So yep, it's gonna look like this actually. Right now, the current state of my PR would make it look like this. Yep. So that's how it's gonna look. So this normal stat panel is basically just showing that overall how many policy changes, like the sum of creations, updations, and deletions are there. So basically, the entire purpose of this dashboard is to kind of like give a set of generic insights, generic holistic view of how Kyverno policies are, are in action across the cluster of the user. And of course, they can tweak all these policies. They can add alerts to it. But yeah, I guess that's the purpose of this dashboard, to basically fulfill generic use case or possibly anyone. So yeah, that's the situation. So like basically the PR is out there. I've also showed you the documentation. So I would love to hear any suggestions or any insights around, if I could improve the documentation, or if you'd like something to be specifically present in the documentation. And I actually have a doubt around that as well. But yeah, like before that, I would like to address some questions if anyone has, or any suggestions around both the dashboard and the documentation.
Yeah, this looks great. And I manually tried this out yesterday on my local cluster. I do have a question for you. So on my Grafana dashboard, I see the count of the cluster policy is something like 8.9. Why do we have those?
Okay, is that the case?
The number of the policy?
Okay, that's interesting, because that should not be that should not be possible, because I'm using count. Okay, I'll actually have a look into that. I mean, that's an interesting one, because if you look at the this thing, the query itself, it's like bound to generate a number, not actually this thing. I guess that's the way stat is working. So I'll actually have a quick look into it. That's a good concern you mentioned. So yeah, I'll have a quick look into that. Sure, no problem.
Okay. Yeah, we can chat offline. I currently have that dashboard running. If you need anything, let's sync up later after the meeting.
Sure, sounds great. Possibly it would be associated with the inherent way in which this stat panel works, because it works in the time range which is basically compliant to the dashboard. So it might be kind of averaging out or taking decimals around that, because the query is fine. Query is actually taking a count, which is supposed to register an integer instead of a float value. But yeah, we'll surely look into this. Shouldn't take much time to resolve this out. But basically, that's like these kind of tweaks are gonna keep on happening. Of course, it's kind of still that's why it's still in a review stage. But I just wanted to show how it's gonna look in action once it's deployed or in use.
I'm not sure if you've mentioned it or gone through it already, but if I recall correctly, when the design was put together, there was going to be a metric to monitor the number of requests hitting Kyverno, which when one is adjusting the resource filters, one can then correlate, how the impact of adding. Is that something that might be possible?
Exactly. So that value can be served by this metric of policy rule results. Just that I'm not plotting it right now here, but that's a good point to, as a suggestion, we can include it as a part of this dashboard to visualize and show how many number of admission requests have been hit across Kyverno.
Okay.
That's and we can even subcategorize that. Okay, how many admission requests have been hit to Kyverno, which ended up triggering, let's say, validated rules. So that's also a capability which these metrics are providing.
Great.
So yeah, we can actually, thanks for the suggestion. We can surely include that.
Yeah, on a local dashboard, I do see there are data for this metric. I don't know why yours didn't have it.
Yeah. So for mine, that's the thing. So I just just before this meeting, I quickly started this thing again. So the basically the data you are seeing, right? So it's of the auto applied policies. So I haven't applied any resource yet here. So that's why there is no admission reviews, and that's why it's saying no data. So like it is not a bug. That's my guarantee. Like I tested it in the afternoon, it was working fine. But yeah.
All right.
Yeah, this looks very good, but I'll have to dig into it and play with it a little bit. Yeah, just one thought, and we can decide. I don't know if there's as we are organizing the dashboards, I mean, also something that we're doing, you know, and we'll publish some of this documentation within Kyverno is just sort of for HA design, we had to kind of think of the webhook separately from the generate controller and also from the policy, you know, reporting and policy controller. So I don't know, maybe there's a way to organize kind of based on those modules as well, but we'll have to research more and see what works best also from a user perspective, right? If I'm looking at webhook metrics versus like the generate metrics, how do I quickly get to those?
All right.
But those could be, I mean, that's just evolutionary things, incremental things we add on top of this, right? This is great.
Thank you. Yeah. Cool, I guess. So if, yeah, I actually, so yeah, we're gonna possibly, so yeah, I just wanted to highlight this again. Like if anyone would like to check out the documentation, please feel free to. I mean, like I would actually love to know that if someone, you know, is not able to understand something from the documentation, because like the last thing I want is that something is over explained or something is, you know, kind of convoluted in the documentation, because yeah, we want people to understand like as clearly as possible the purpose of these metrics so that they can make the best use out of them. So yeah, do check out the PR and hopefully it's gonna get merged, but yeah, do check it out.
Yeah, I went through the setup instructions. It's pretty easy to get started with, and I'm able to set up the Grafana dashboard. I'll definitely check out the rest pages for the different metrics.
Yep. All right.
I think we have another question that we want to discuss for the tables, right?
Yes. Yeah, so that's what I was about to come to. So I guess Shooting, you had this concern, right? So exactly when you say that, okay, you wanted to see tables, like, so I just wanted to confirm, like, I remember whenever I used to basically, okay, it's not working here, but yeah, the way I used to show you actually in the Prometheus portal, right? So the panels, the graphs, the table of metrics, instead of, you know, they were basically in a prettified form, the metrics were visible, right? Are you talking about that way?
Yeah. So that we have to set up Prometheus as well.
Yeah. So that's the thing. So actually that was just the way Prometheus was showing the metrics. I mean, technically that can be visualized on Grafana as well. So you just have to go to explore and like whatever you enter. If I just do this, yeah. So it's representing it in the form of tables, right? So that's what it is doing. But yeah, basically to answer your question, basically I guess the thing which you were talking about was that so if we go exactly to the metrics endpoint, it's showing all the logs in a very pretty manner. Okay, I have to port forward to the service now. Just a second. Actually depict what the exact issue we are talking about here. Yep. So yep. So that's how the metrics look. But right, but these are not the metrics which are supposed to be read by us. Like I'm just opening it randomly. Of course, we can open it, but they are not supposed to be kind of like human readable. They're supposed to be Prometheus readable. So there is a Prometheus sitting out there of a user, which is basically capturing all kinds of metrics. And we basically provide that Prometheus a scrape config and tell it the location of these metrics as well. Like we give it the address of our Kyverno service, port number 8000, and Prometheus basically ends up scraping those metrics. And then when we basically go to Prometheus, we can actually see it in a tabulated in a kind of like a pretty form, putting the metrics all together in one place. Oh, not that I'd have to actually port forward to the pod. But that's my point. Like that, just exactly the way Grafana is representing, that's exactly the way Prometheus is also going to represent. So my point was that, yeah. So yeah, shooting. That's what I was thinking. So like you were, I guess you were mentioning about setting up a documentation around how to go get those tabulated metrics. But I guess that exactly can be achieved by a Grafana and in the Explore tab. And like because if it involved documentation on how to set up Prometheus, I mean like I haven't ever seen any tool doing that, like how to set up Prometheus in the first place, how to write the scrape config and all, because that's usually a component which is separate from Kyverno, which is separate from what, like it's a different storage backend which users are managing on their own end, and its documentation is supposed to be provided by Prometheus itself. So that's why I was kind of skeptical around should we actually involve any sort of documentation around how to set up Prometheus or how to set up Grafana. So that's actually was one of the questions or doubts which I was thinking that should we put up a documentation on how to set up Prometheus in the first place, how to write scrape configs. I mean, that's exactly what, or maybe we can add a quick, like very small paragraph and just adding a hyperlink to the exact rightful link of documentation of Prometheus, where it actually, explains where actually the Prometheus folks explain how to set up Prometheus, how to set up script config. But yeah, like there were just like so many question marks around this whole idea of adding the documentation around Prometheus. So I just felt I should ask this in the contributors meeting.
Right. So this is the table I was asking for yesterday.
Yeah.
So I didn't came across this dashboard. I thought we can only access that through Prometheus, but I think it's fine if we can visualize the table using Grafana dashboard as well.
Sure.
So sure. It's good to have set up like instructions for Prometheus, but I believe we can start with this one.
I guess I can do one thing. I can. That's actually a good point. So usually, as a user, I might want to just have a random play around with the metrics of Kyverno. So like right now, just I did right. I just randomly entered this query just to see what it ends up resulting into, and I got a nice pretty table of metrics, right? So I'll just quickly add a 2, 3, 4, 5 liner explanation around how people can do that. It's pretty straightforward, anyways. Just over to the Explore option, choose the data source, and fire up the query. It's as simple as that. But I'll just add to the documentation so that the users who are not that familiar with Grafana can make a nice use of it.
Right. That's a good idea because we have those. We provide those queries on our website, right? So
yes.
Yesterday I couldn't find where to put those queries, so I was asking about the tables. But I think if we have some like a few steps to navigate to this table dashboard, I think that would be great.
Yep. Awesome. So yeah, so I guess I got the point. So first point around documenting around this whole Explore feature of tabulated output of queries, and secondly the suggestion around adding a panel depicting the incoming admission requests which have hit Kyverno, and maybe even add a kind of like basically parameterize the panel as well to go further granular, whether maybe like I just want to see how many validated rules have been triggered by the incoming admission request. So yeah, adding some panels around that. So took these suggestions.
Yep, sounds good.
Yes. So if no one has any questions or suggestions, so I guess I'll stop sharing my screen. Thank you for your time. Yep.
No, thank you. Okay. I guess that's all the topics we want to cover in today's meeting. Before I stop the meeting, do we have any other things we want to discuss? All right, I guess that's a no. Thank you, everybody. I'll see you in the next contributors meeting.